Hi there, welcome to my channel where I dive into fascinating economic trends and analyze their impact on society. The assertion that both Soviet communism and American capitalism have failed invites a profound examination of these two systems that dominated the 20th century. Both ideologies, Soviet-style communism and American-style capitalism, claimed to offer a superior way of organizing society, promising economic prosperity, equality, and justice. However, both have been subject to deep criticism, often labeled as failures in practice despite their lofty ideals. To understand these critiques, we must look at how each system functioned historically, where they fell short, and how their perceived failures manifest in contemporary society. Soviet communism was grounded in Marxist-Leninist ideals that envisioned a classless society where the means of production were collectively owned. In theory, this system was designed to eliminate exploitation and ensure equality for all citizens. However, the reality of Soviet communism unfolded quite differently. The centrally planned economy that was supposed to efficiently meet the needs of society became a breeding ground for inefficiencies. Alongside economic inefficiency, the political landscape of the Soviet Union became deeply repressive. The state, particularly under Joseph Stalin, prioritized state control and suppression of dissent over democratic participation. Millions of citizens were subjected to purges, labor camps, and state violence. The Gulag system, a network of forced labor camps, epitomized the authoritarian nature of Soviet communism. This widespread political repression not only undermined individual freedoms, but also created a climate of fear that stifled social progress. By the 1980s, exacerbated by the Cold War, Soviet communism was on the brink of collapse. The introduction of reforms under Mikhail Gorbachev, such as perestroika and glasnost, aimed to revitalize the system. The rigid, centralized nature of the Soviet economy and its political apparatus could not adapt to the changing world. The Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, marking the end of an era and solidifying the argument that Soviet communism had ultimately failed to deliver on its promises of equality and prosperity. While Soviet communism experienced a dramatic collapse, American capitalism, though still standing, faces its own crises that suggest systemic failure in key areas. One of the most pressing criticisms is the growing wealth inequality in the United States. Over the past few decades, the gap between the rich and the poor has widened significantly. The top 1% of Americans now control a disproportionate share of the nation's wealth, while wages for the middle and working classes have stagnated. This inequality undermines the foundational promise of capitalism as a system where hard work and merit can lead to success. Instead, critics argue, it has created a society where opportunity is increasingly determined by inherited wealth and access to resources. In addition to inequality, American capitalism has been prone to periodic financial crises that reveal its inherent instability. The most notable recent example is the 2008 financial collapse, triggered by risky lending practices and speculation in the housing market. The resulting Great Recession led to widespread unemployment, foreclosures, and a government bailout of large financial institutions. The crisis exposed deep flaws in the capitalist system, where the pursuit of short-term profits often trumps long-term stability and economic justice. For many, the fact that large corporations were bailed out while ordinary citizens suffered further illustrated the moral failures of American capitalism. Environmental degradation is another area where capitalism, particularly in the United States, has come under severe scrutiny. The drive for profit often leads to the exploitation of natural resources without regard for long-term environmental sustainability. The US, as one of the largest carbon emitters, exemplifies how capitalist economies can prioritize economic growth over ecological responsibility. Critics argue that this failure to address climate change and environmental destruction represents a catastrophic shortcoming, as the consequences of environmental degradation threaten global stability. The US healthcare system, largely driven by capitalist principles, also highlights the failures of American capitalism. Despite being one of the wealthiest nations in the world, millions of Americans struggle to access affordable healthcare. The cost of medical treatment is among the highest globally, and health outcomes such as life expectancy are often lower than in countries with universal healthcare systems. This system, critics argue, prioritizes profit over human well-being, leaving many citizens without adequate care. The disparities in healthcare access and affordability further fuel the argument that capitalism, in its American form, has failed to meet the basic needs of the population. Moreover, the influence of corporations in American politics is another significant critique of capitalism. Wealthy interests, through lobbying and campaign contributions, exert enormous influence on policy making, often at the expense of the broader population. Critics argue that this undermines democracy, as corporate power increasingly shapes public policy in ways that benefit the wealthy, while the needs of ordinary citizens go unaddressed. In addition to economic and political issues, American capitalism has also been critiqued for its social and cultural impacts. The relentless pursuit of material success and individualism can lead to alienation and a loss of community. In capitalist societies, wealth is often tied to one's ability to consume and accumulate wealth, which can foster a sense of social disconnection. Rising rates of mental health issues such as depression and anxiety have been linked to the pressures of living in a highly competitive, consumer-driven culture. Although both Soviet communism and American capitalism have been criticized, the nature of their failures differs significantly. Soviet communism failed systemically and collapsed under the weight of its inefficiencies and repression. In contrast, American capitalism persists but faces growing internal challenges, particularly regarding inequality, instability, and environmental concerns. While capitalism has not collapsed in the same dramatic fashion as Soviet communism, many argue that its current trajectory is unsustainable. Soviet communism and American capitalism represent two opposing systems that have both struggled to deliver on their promises. Soviet communism ultimately failed because it could not adapt to the changing world, leading to the collapse of the Soviet Union. American capitalism, while still functioning, faces deep criticism for exacerbating inequality, environmental degradation, and social alienation. Both systems, in their most extreme forms, have demonstrated that they can produce deeply undesirable outcomes. That's it for today's video. I hope you found this analysis insightful. If you did, please like this video and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more engaging content like this. As always, I appreciate your support.